let's jump right into this explainer. Look, we're going to skip the usual marketing fluff you constantly hear about compliance automation. Today, we're dropping directly into the high-stakes pressure of an auditor's hot seat. Just picture it. You're sitting at the conference table, you slide a folder of evidence across to your assessor, and a hand stops it, right? Every single audit has this exact moment. So we're going to look at how NSAuditor AI Enterprise version 0.40.0 changes the entire conversation at that table, basically by making radical honesty and explicitly disclosed gaps your strongest features.
So the assessor opens the folder and they hit you with the absolute simplest question. What did you find? Now, pretty much every basic compliance tool out there attempts to answer this. They'll just hand you a massive mountain of vulnerabilities, a raw list of CVEs, a generic score, but honestly, that doesn't actually help you defend your posture at the assessor's table. Literally all it does is prove you ran a scanner.
Watch how the tension builds here, because the very next question is where standard evidence packs really start to crumble. The assessor looks right at you and asks, okay, what did you leave out and who approved that? This introduces the first incredibly weak joint of a standard evidence pack. Usually an exception is just, a name typed into a spreadsheet. But an assessor knows that Steve typed his name in a cell is not evidence. They want to know about the suppressed findings, and they want the actual cryptographic proof of their approval.
Then they escalate straight to the core of evidence integrity, demanding who actually produced this pack, and can anyone besides your vendor confirm it? See, a pack that cannot mathematically prove its own authorship is just testimony. It's just you sitting there saying you did the work. But a pack that can prove its authorship, using a sign pack and verify pack process with an operator-held key covering one framework's envelope, verifiable totally offline with OpenSSL, now that is evidence. It never relies on a vendor attestation.
And then we get to the newest, arguably hardest question an assessor will ask you today. You claim this requirement. Which of its assessment objectives does your evidence actually reach? This sets up the exact failure point of those over-promising compliance scanners. In the rigorous frameworks, just one assessment objective scored as not met fails its entire requirement. So, a vendor claiming broad, wholesale requirement coverage from a scanner is describing a tool that literally cannot exist.
This is where we flip the script. NSAuditor proudly puts the number 2 right on the screen. NSAuditor AI Enterprise covers exactly 2 out of 110 requirements of NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2 strictly as evidence substrate for CMMC Level 2 preparation. Most vendors would be terrified to show a number like 2 of 110, but here it is the headline. They claim coverage only when every single determination statement within an objective is a technical system state that the scan reads directly. All 110 requirements are enumerated. None are silently missing, but the SSP and POAM, those remain the operator's artifacts.
Now, when it comes to where this runs and how it handles data, I'm going to read this exact sentence verbatim because it establishes the precise structural alignment here. NSAuditor's air-gapped operation is compatible with the FedRAMP, DFARS, CMMC threat model where SAS data flow is prohibited. The key takeaway? CUI scope is strictly the operator's assertion. The product fits inside an enclave without introducing a SAS flow, but it never ever defines that boundary for you.
Let's look at how it handles the vulnerabilities it does find. This is their exploit first vulnerability triage, which joins the KEV and EPSS directly at scan time. The logic is totally exploit-driven. A KEV-listed medium vulnerability will absolutely outrank an unexploited critical. The catalog date travels right with the finding, so you're prioritizing what is actively dangerous today rather than panicking over theoretical severity. Absolutely no exploit data ships out. Notice these specific, mundane band names: known exploited, elevated, baseline. They aren't screaming active or probable at you. That refusal to dramatize is exactly where the credibility lies. And crucially, if those operator-supplied intelligence stores go stale, they fail closed. They will never incorrectly report a vulnerability as not exploited.
Returning to our auditor's question about exceptions, how do we actually prove who approved them? Well, approvals are ED 25519 signed and verified for approvers whose registry entry carries key material. It's completely offline authorship verification that covers one framework's envelope. You aren't trusting a web dashboard, you're verifying cryptographic signatures.
But there is a very firm line drawn here. A missing verdict is not checked, never failed. If a registry entry is simply missing key material, the report honestly renders that as not checked.
We don't call it failed because we are never going to send an assessor out hunting for a cryptographic forgery that never actually happened. Built on that total transparency, one single scan maps to 8 distinct compliance frameworks. But the true selling point isn't just the mapping itself. It's that any collection failures explicitly fail closed into disclosed gaps. If it couldn't get the data, it tells you it couldn't get the data. It never silently skips a check and pretends everything is fine.
This brings us to the structural framework constraints, and again, the out-of-scope column is the absolute selling point here. To be completely precise, GDPR mapping provides Article 32 infrastructure substrate only, and NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2 mapping provides evidence substrate for CMMC Level 2 preparation, while physical security and governance are entirely out of scope. Claiming exactly what a scanner cannot do is the only way to validate what it did do.
And keeping your data secure? They don't just promise zero data exfiltration as some fluffy marketing slogan. They frame it as a published register of exactly 17 enumerated egress paths. The AI runs strictly with the customer's own keys, with payloads redacted at a single choke point. And the only outbound evidence path, say pushing your GRC data out, is strictly opt-in.
You have incredibly tight control over the deployment, blocking all outbound SaaS data flows. You can deploy via NPM, use the distroless AMD64 container on the AWS Marketplace, or run it via Claude Desktop over MCP. But the real star is the air gap. This is a restricted dependency complete bundle proven to install with the network interface card completely down. We're talking offline license validation and offline CVE matching.
So how do you update it without a network? The offline data carry. You download the intelligence feeds externally, you physically walk the archive across to the isolated host, and you execute the feed import locally. And we need to state this exactly as they do. This data carry process is integrity checked, not authenticated. To absolutely lock down the evidence integrity, you can apply timestamps. But following their strict discipline, RFC 3161 timestamps are strictly opt-in, with no default, ever. If you configure it, each artifact gets a token that can be completely verified offline via OpenSSL. This discipline of honesty is actively baked into the software. It discloses its own evidence gaps. If an operator references a foreign cloud key, say a key in an AWS or GCP account, they may not actually control. It generates a disclosed evidence gap, naming both accounts. It won't pass it off as customer custody evidence. And if there's a technical limit, like on Azure, where the identifier does not carry its owning scope, the report explicitly states that limit right there on the page. Bringing this full circle back to the assessor's table, this is the difference between testimony and evidence. Because this pack explicitly states what it did not check, discloses every single gap, proves who approved every exception, proves who produced the pack, and frankly, because it claims exactly 2 of 110 requirements, that is the only reason an assessor can mathematically trust the other 108 things it tells them. Overstating posture is a federal matter, so restraint is your best feature.
The next time you slide that folder across the table, make sure you're handing over mathematically undeniable evidence. You can find the complete details at www.nsauditor.com/AI/enterprise.